Andrew Mountbatten in Windsor, once a name synonymous with the title Prince of the United Kingdom, has now become a symbol of the downfall of a privileged life. From being Queen Elizabeth II's beloved son, raised in luxury and power, he has turned into the man cast out by his own family. The palace that once welcomed him with open arms now shuts its doors in silence. All that remains are the whispers of the public about a man who has lost everything: his honor, his freedom, and even his blood ties. The end of such privilege did not come from a single event. It began with lies, shadowy relationships, and sins Andrew tried to hide beneath his princely image. But once the light shone upon them, the world finally saw what lay behind those royal smiles: a string of shameful scandals. What shocked the public most was the coldness of the royal family itself. Those who once shielded him were now the ones stripping him of everything. What drove King Charles, a reserved and dutiful elder brother, to make an unprecedented decision in royal history? What could turn a British prince into a man despised by an entire nation? To understand why King Charles dared to strip his brother of his titles, we must return to the origins of the scandal. Two names that haunted the world: Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. That day, Buckingham Palace was suffocatingly quiet. No laughter, no greetings, only the sound of soft footsteps echoing across the marble floors, leading to the Privy Council chamber, the room where the most confidential meeting of the decade was about to take place. On the table lay an official document bearing the royal coat of arms, its crimson seal of King Charles III still slightly wet. When the bell rang, everyone in the room understood. A new chapter, perhaps the most painful one in the royal family's history, was about to begin. The king's private secretary was the one to read the decree. His voice trembled slightly as he began. By order of His Majesty the King, all titles, privileges, and honors of Andrew, Duke of York, are hereby permanently revoked. He is no longer to be addressed as His Royal Highness. His formal name henceforth shall be Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. In that moment, silence filled the room. No one dared to lift their head. Only the king's gaze, steady, deep, and cold, remained fixed forward. Andrew sat motionless, his face drained of color. He had heard whispers of this possibility, but when the words were spoken aloud, it cut through his pride like a blade of ice. 10 years ago, he stood beside the Queen at grand ceremonies, shaking hands with world leaders, holding his head high as a symbol of British dignity. And now, with a single document bearing the royal seal, it was all erased. The decision, within royal tradition, was unprecedented. To strip a prince of the title His Royal Highness meant erasing not just a name, but an entire identity. Andrew would no longer have royal protection, no public funding, no place at official events, and most importantly, no belonging to the royal family. In the eyes of the world, he was now a commoner, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, surviving on private wealth and the fragile pity of those who once called him kin. For centuries, the British monarchy has endured countless scandals, divorces, affairs, even internal rebellions, but never before had a direct son of the Queen been officially cut off by his own brother. In the culture of monarchy, a royal title is sacred, the soul of sovereignty itself. By signing that decree, King Charles had delivered a life sentence, not imprisonment behind bars, but a lifelong confinement in disgrace. When the news broke the next morning, the British press exploded. The Times printed a stark headline: "The Fall of the Queen's Son." The Daily Mail splashed his bowed head across the front page with just 3 words: "End of privilege." Meanwhile, The Guardian wrote, "Bimamo, the king chooses honor over blood." Across social media, millions of Britons echoed the same sentiment. This should have happened long ago. Public opinion split in two. One side, mostly the middle class and younger generations, felt vindicated. They saw this as proof that the monarchy was finally facing justice. If he were an ordinary man, he'd have been jailed years ago. Losing his title is the least he deserves, said one Londoner on television. The other side, the old aristocracy, saw things differently. They believed Charles had been too ruthless, breaking the unspoken rule of protecting the family's dignity, yet even they dared not object openly, for everyone knew the monarchy's honor was hanging by a thread, and only a decisive act could save it. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was even heavier. Servants whispered they had never seen the king so silent. He did not rage. He did not punish. He simply said one short sentence: "The royal family cannot defend what is wrong." Camilla sat beside him, watching quietly. Prince William, the heir to the throne, said nothing, but his silence was taken as full agreement. To them, this was not merely a family matter, but a declaration. The British monarchy had entered a new era, where honor mattered more than blood. Outside, reporters camped through the night at Buckingham's gates. When the official statement was posted, the sound of camera shutters filled the cold, rainy air. An age of privilege had ended, and the witness was none other than Britain itself. From remote Scottish villages to small pubs in Manchester, everyone was talking about the same man, Andrew, with a mix of pity and disdain. At Royal Lodge, Andrew quietly packed his belongings. The nameplate by the gate was being taken down. No longer Duke of York, only Mr. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Old servants departed. Old friends stopped calling. Once he had everything, and now he had nothing, undone by choices he could never undo. For the royal family, this was the only way to protect Queen Elizabeth II's legacy, the belief that royal honor was untouchable. For Britain, it was a symbol of change, a monarchy willing to face its own sins. But for Andrew, it was a life sentence. No court had spoken it aloud, but the entire nation already knew. I think he was guilty. From that moment on, the British royal family no longer had a Prince Andrew. All that remained was a man named Mountbatten Windsor, living in an empty house, haunted by a past that could never be erased. But what truly sent chills down the spines of the British public was the truth lurking beneath it all. Because long before his own brother condemned him, Andrew had already buried his honor in the cesspool of depravity known as Jeffrey Epstein. Virginia Giuffre, just 17 at the time, was an ordinary girl from an ordinary family in Florida. In the summer of 2000, she was working part-time at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago Club, a playground for the rich and powerful. That was the fateful summer. Ghislaine Maxwell, the polished British socialite who claimed to recruit for billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, approached Virginia right in the staff changing room. Maxwell complimented her looks and dangled promises: high-paying massage work, travel around the world, life in luxury mansions. "All you need is to be pretty and keep a secret," Maxwell said, according to Virginia's later accounts in her memoir and interviews. Virginia, living on the edge, abused as a child, a high school dropout, no stable home, was easily swept up by the offer. She had no idea she was stepping into a sophisticated sex trafficking ring where young girls were turned into commodities for the elite. Within days, she was inside Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. And then the name Prince Andrew surfaced, like a special prize in that sick system. The first time Virginia was delivered to Andrew was in 2001, in London. According to her detailed testimony in a 2019 BBC interview and her memoir The Survivor, published posthumously, it all started one morning. Ghislaine Maxwell woke her early. "Today you're going to meet a prince." Virginia couldn't believe it. She was taken shopping on Bond Street. Short dresses, high heels, expensive lingerie. "I felt like a doll," she recalled. "They dressed me up like I was part of a show." That evening, Virginia was brought to Tramp, a famous London nightclub. Andrew was already there, in a dark suit, grinning widely, shaking hands. Virginia remembered clearly. "He danced with me. He was a terrible dancer. He sweated profusely, like it was raining, and he smelled awful, like old sweat mixed with expensive cologne." She forced a smile in the memory, but her eyes told a different story. "I'd never seen anyone sweat that much." After the dancing, they got into cars. Andrew wasn't in the same vehicle as Virginia and Maxwell. He rode behind with his security. In the car, Maxwell was blunt. You have to do for the prince what you do for Jeffrey. Virginia froze. She knew exactly what doing for Jeffrey meant. Massages that turned into forced sexual acts. I had no choice, she said. I was just a 17-year-old girl, trapped in that world. I was terrified, but I didn't dare refuse. They arrived at a house in Belgravia, owned by one of Maxwell's friends. Virginia was led to the bedroom. Andrew was waiting. He didn't say much, she recounted. He just smiled and acted like it was normal. I was abused that night. Virginia was adamant. This was the first of 3 times she was trafficked to the British prince. The second encounter happened in New York, inside Epstein's mansion. Virginia didn't recall the details sharply. She only knew she was forced again, treated like an object. But the third time, the final one, was the most horrifying. This time, Andrew wasn't alone. According to Virginia's testimony in her memoir in a 2019 60 Minutes Australia interview, the party took place at a mansion on Little St. James, Epstein's infamous pedophile island. There was Epstein, there was Andrew, and there were 8 other girls, Virginia said, her voice trembling. They were younger than me, looked about 16 to 20. They didn't speak English. We weren't allowed to talk to each other. That was one of Jeffrey's rules. The girls were lined up, assigned roles. Virginia was pushed into the center. It was a group sex session, she stated plainly. I wasn't a person to them. I was just a toy being passed around. She remembered Andrew's face clearly. No hesitation. No remorse. He was smiling. He was enjoying it. He knew who he was, and he reveled in the power. Virginia didn't cry as she told the story. She had cried enough. Now she just wanted the world to know the truth. And then there was the photo. The picture was taken right after the dancing at Tramp, before Virginia was taken back to Belgravia. Epstein held the camera. Andrew stood in the middle, his right arm around Virginia's waist. She in a short black dress, hair tied up, the innocent face of a 17-year-old girl. Behind them, Ghislaine Maxwell grinned broadly. The photo was first published in 2011 by the Mail on Sunday. It instantly became an icon of collapse. Why? Because it was undeniable. Not hearsay, not rumor. Physical proof, a British prince, the Queen's son, with his arm around a minor in a sex trafficking network. The image spread worldwide in hours. Every repost hammered it home to the public. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is real. It shattered the royal facade. It made millions ask, how was someone like this protected for so long? It turned Virginia from accuser into a silent hero. And for the first time, it left Andrew with nowhere to hide. That photograph wasn't just a picture. It was a weapon. It was the living proof Virginia had guarded for 20 long years. She refused to stay silent. She refused to be bought. She refused to be intimidated. Even when she was smeared, called a liar, followed, and mentally tortured, she kept that photo. She kept speaking. She kept standing tall. And when the photo finally resurfaced, instead of staying quiet and allowing an investigation, Andrew made what history would later call the biggest mistake of his life. Instead of bowing his head, he chose to fight back. Instead of apologizing, he chose denial. In his disastrous 2019 interview with Emily Maitlis on BBC Newsnight, he said, I have no recollection of ever meeting this woman. None. He called the photo fake. He even came up with a bizarre alibi. I don't sweat because of a medical condition. Yet Virginia had said he was sweating like rain. Andrew insisted he was at a Pizza Express in Woking with his daughter that night, a claim so absurd it became a global joke. But Virginia wasn't laughing. She stayed calm. She presented her memoirs, interviews, evidence. She described every detail, every scent, every glance, every word. She didn't need to shout. Her truth was already loud enough. Leaked emails later proved Andrew had lied. He kept in touch with Epstein after 2010. One message read, "We're in this together. Let's play again soon." He ordered his security team to dig up Virginia's past using confidential data. He wanted to smear her. He wanted to silence her. But he failed, because Virginia never went silent. Even after her suicide in April 2025 at her farm in Australia, her voice still echoes. Her memoir, The Survivor, published posthumously, exposed everything. Her family continues to fight. The public believes her. The royal family has been crumbling piece by piece because of her. Virginia Giuffre was not a victim. She was a breaker of systems, a 17-year-old girl with no money, no power, no title, brought down a prince. She didn't live to see the day Andrew was stripped of his titles, evicted from the Royal Lodge, and reduced to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. But she changed history. She cracked the once impenetrable wall of the British monarchy. She proved that truth, no matter how small, no matter how suppressed, can destroy even the mightiest power. And that voice, the voice of a 17-year-old girl robbed of her youth, still lingers. In every page of her memoir, in every photograph, in every leaked email, in every headline, in the eyes of every other survivor who dares to speak, Virginia is gone. But her testimony lives forever. In November 2019, Prince Andrew walked into the BBC studio with the quiet confidence of a royal, gray suit, blue tie, polite smile. Across from him sat Emily Maitlis, the razor-sharp journalist of Newsnight. The goal: to shut down the allegations made by Virginia Giuffre, the woman who claimed she was trafficked to him 3 times when she was just 17. But within 50 minutes, that interview became the biggest PR disaster in the history of the British monarchy. Maitlis began bluntly. She says she had dinner with you, danced with you at Tramp nightclub in London, and then had sexual relations with you at Ghislaine Maxwell's house in Belgravia. Andrew looked directly into the camera, his tone calm. I have no recollection of ever meeting this woman. None whatsoever. He repeated it 3 times, no hesitation, no blink. Then came the photo, the same haunting image that had shadowed him for nearly a decade. Andrew's hand around Virginia's waist, Ghislaine grinning in the background. Maitlis asked, "Is that your hand?" Andrew shrugged. There's no proof that's my hand. It could be doctored. I don't recall the photo being taken. He said it casually, as if he were discussing the weather. But Virginia remembered vividly. She said Andrew had been sweating profusely while they danced. Maitlis pressed, "She says you were sweating heavily." Andrew smiled, that now infamous meme smile, and replied, I have a peculiar medical condition. I don't sweat, or at least, I didn't sweat at the time. He explained it was due to an overdose of adrenaline during the Falklands War that had damaged his sweat glands. A defense so bizarre it bordered on science fiction. And then came the peak of absurdity, the Pizza Express alibi. Maitlis asked, "Where were you that night?" Andrew replied firmly, "I took Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking at about 4 or 5 p.m. It was a birthday party. I remember it distinctly because going to Pizza Express in Woking is a very unusual thing for me to do." Maitlis paused for several seconds. The global audience did too. And then the world laughed. Within just 24 hours, Shad Pizza Express was trending #1 on Twitter. Memes flooded the internet. Andrew sitting inside a pizza shop, wearing a crown, drenched in sweat. The British press called it media suicide. The Guardian wrote, he didn't defend his honor, he buried himself. The public was outraged, not because of the allegations, but because of his blatant arrogance. A prince denying a victim, blaming a fake medical condition, remembering a pizza restaurant, yet forgetting a girl who was abused. But the lies didn't stop at the interview. In 2025, leaked emails from Epstein's archive exposed everything. Andrew once claimed he had cut all ties with Epstein after their Central Park meeting in December 2010. In his BBC One interview, he said, "We went for a walk in the park, agreed to part ways. I left the next day and never had contact again." A shameless lie. The email showed he was still in touch with Epstein until March 2011. Even worse, one message was sent the day after Virginia's photo went public. Andrew wrote, "It would seem we are in this together and we'll have to rise above it. Otherwise, keep in close touch and we'll play some more soon." That final line, "to play some more soon," it sent chills down everyone's spine. To use those words with a convicted pedophile, what did play mean in that context? With Epstein's conviction for trafficking underage girls, the press called it undeniable proof. It wasn't an accusation anymore. It was written evidence. Andrew hadn't just lied about cutting ties. He openly supported Epstein when the scandal broke. The impact was immediate. What began as a PR disaster now looked like a potential crime. The public no longer doubted. They were certain. A YouGov poll showed 78% believed Virginia, only 6% believed Andrew. The royal family was forced to act. King Charles stripped him of all royal titles. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was evicted from Royal Lodge. Companies cut ties. Friends disappeared. That BBC interview wasn't an attempt at redemption. It was a detonator. Every lie, from "I don't sweat" to "Pizza Express," became evidence against him. It turned a prince into an international joke and then into a potential criminal. His words didn't protect him. They destroyed him. But Andrew didn't stop at denial. He went further, far enough to bring in Scotland Yard. After the Virginia Giuffre scandal broke, instead of remaining silent and awaiting investigation, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor chose the most dangerous route: to attack the victim. In the early days of the crisis, inside Royal Lodge, where he still lived like a retired aristocrat, Andrew summoned his security and media advisors. According to leaked documents, he ordered his personal bodyguard to collect every piece of personal information about Virginia, including her date of birth, address, social security number, and employment history. His goal was clear: to dig into her past and find anything that could discredit the 17-year-old girl the world believed was a victim. But that plan quickly unraveled. A former royal security officer revealed to the press that Andrew's actions weren't just unethical, they were illegal under the UK Data Protection Act. A citizen's personal data cannot be used for private purposes, especially not to destroy a witness. Former Royal Security Chief Di Davies, who once oversaw the protection of senior royals, spoke out. If any ordinary person did what Andrew did, they'd be arrested immediately. The fact that he's still free is an insult to justice. Those words shook Buckingham Palace. Some of King Charles's senior advisors said this was the final straw. The moment public trust completely collapsed. Andrew hadn't just sinned in the past. He was still showing arrogance and contempt for the law. As the press began re-examining his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, darker secrets surfaced. Among the FBI files once seized from Epstein's estate was a chilling note where Epstein referred to Andrew as the King of Kink. According to a former Epstein assistant, Andrew was the only man who could outdo Epstein in recklessness. Together, they hosted private parties in New York, Palm Beach, and Little St. James, the island investigators later called the Island of Sin. There, young girls, some underage, were turned into entertainment for powerful guests from Europe and the Middle East. Investigative author Andrew Lowney, who spent years researching the hidden lives of Britain's elite, revealed that Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's partner and recruiter, would often send Andrew special photo albums. Inside were pictures of dozens of young girls, each labeled with details like height, eye color, age, and nationality. Epstein called it the Prince's Menu. Andrew would mark the ones he was interested in. Days later, those girls would be invited to a mansion in London or Epstein's private island. None of them knew what awaited them. These revelations outraged Britain. The man once seen as a war hero of the Falklands was now viewed as depraved and soulless. In interviews, Lowney didn't hold back. Andrew isn't a victim of the system. He's the perfect product of power without accountability. When a man believes he's above the law, morality is the first casualty. But the story didn't stop there. International media began spreading disturbing rumors about Andrew's sexual behavior. Former members of his security detail claimed that during trips to Thailand, he would disappear for hours and return drunk and out of control. Tabloids like The Sun and Daily Mirror hinted at secret affairs with transgender individuals, dubbing him the Prince of Bangkok's Night. Though no official evidence surfaced, the sheer volume of these stories showed how little faith the public had left in him. Those who once worked closely with Andrew described him as addicted to power and pleasure, viewing women as trophies, obsessed with submission. One former bodyguard recalled, he always demanded everyone address him as Your Royal Highness, even at private parties. For him, the title was the last thread of power, even in his downfall. That line captures Andrew's tragedy, a man who believed the crown could hide his sins. But the more he tried to hide, the angrier the public grew. Human rights groups and women's organizations across the UK and the US demanded the investigation be reopened. They argued that Andrew's behavior wasn't just personal misconduct, but a systemic crime protected by royal privilege. One of Virginia Giuffre's campaign members said it best. Andrew didn't just betray the victims, he betrayed the very ideals of Britain, where justice is supposed to serve everyone. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace maintained absolute silence. No denial, no apology. That silence convinced the public that what had been leaked was merely the tip of the iceberg. And beneath the surface lay darker, more terrifying secrets. Secrets powerful enough to shake the foundation of the monarchy if ever revealed. In the end, Prince Andrew appeared more isolated than ever. From a once respected royal to a man haunted by fear of prosecution and public disgrace, his downfall came not from courts or the media, but from the sins he had carefully cultivated himself. But Andrew's sins didn't end behind closed doors. They spilled outward into murky financial dealings so severe that even King Charles was forced to intervene. Prince Andrew, once hailed as the Queen's most trusted trade envoy, slowly lost everything: reputation, career, and the last fragments of public trust. For nearly a decade, he represented the United Kingdom as a global trade ambassador, promoting economic partnerships under the royal family's name. But behind the glittering facade of diplomatic dinners and billion-pound deals lay a web of shadowy connections, backroom favors, and unexplained profits. Between 2001 and 2011, when Andrew served as special trade envoy, Britain hoped he would be the monarchy's shining face in global commerce. He attended international summits, met Middle Eastern sheikhs and Asian leaders, and signed lucrative agreements meant to strengthen British influence abroad. Yet behind the polished smile of the Prince of Diplomacy, royal privilege had quietly turned into currency. In the Middle East, it was said he accepted tokens of gratitude from oil magnates, yachts, jewels, lavish holidays. Some contracts, supposedly to advance trade, funneled personal benefits to Andrew and his inner circle. In China, wealthy businessmen allegedly paid enormous consulting fees just to sit beside him at private dinners. When royal status becomes a bargaining chip, the line between public duty and private gain fades into dangerous obscurity. That corruption extended beyond Andrew himself. It reached those closest to him, including his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson. Though divorced, their financial ties remained tangled. When Sarah fell deep into debt, Jeffrey Epstein, the notorious sex offender, appeared as a so-called savior, lending her over £2 million to stay afloat. But that generosity came at a devastating cost: loyalty. She was expected to shield Andrew's reputation, no matter the truth. The irony turned tragic when Epstein's crimes came to light, pulling Andrew further into the scandal's vortex. Photos of the prince inside Epstein's mansion, handwritten letters, testimonies from victims, they shattered the illusion completely. The world no longer saw a friendly royal or a tireless diplomat, only a man seduced by power, privilege, and the darkest temptations he was raised to resist. At first, Buckingham Palace tried to protect him, attempting to contain the media firestorm. But the more they concealed, the angrier the public became. Royal patrons severed ties. Charities he once represented quietly erased his name. Politicians distanced themselves. Within months, Andrew was stripped of all official duties. His trade envoy title was revoked. His private office at the palace was shut down. The British press called it the fastest fall from grace in modern royal history. Once trusted by Queen Elizabeth II herself, Andrew had become the monarchy's greatest liability. Editorials in The Guardian and The Times asked bluntly, how much of his diplomacy served Britain, and how much served his own pocket? The monarchy's silence could no longer save him. When moral justice speaks, titles mean nothing. Andrew was stripped of nearly all honorary military roles and forbidden to use His Royal Highness. He now lives in quiet exile at Royal Lodge, cut off from the life he once flaunted. Even at his mother's funeral, many saw his presence not as acceptance, but as the family's final act of mercy. Analysts describe Andrew as the ultimate cautionary tale of royal privilege gone rotten. Trained in military discipline, expected to embody duty, he instead believed himself untouchable, above the law, beyond accountability. But when power is separated from responsibility, it becomes a double-edged sword that eventually turns inward. Worse still, his scandal didn't just destroy his own name, it scarred the royal family itself. In a modern age demanding transparency and accountability, exploiting royal status for personal gain is nothing short of betrayal. As one headline asked, if a prince can fall this far, who in the royal family truly deserves the public's trust or their taxes? From Britain's diplomatic prince to the monarchy's outcast, Andrew's story became a modern tragedy. No apology could repair what he'd broken. And his silence, instead of repentance, felt like defiance, a final insult to a nation that once believed in him. When everyone turns away, all that remains is the public's demand for justice. Justice that must apply equally, whether to a prince or a commoner. Because in the eyes of the British people, a crown cannot shield guilt. It only holds meaning when built on trust. And once that trust is lost, even the crown itself becomes worthless. The reaction across Britain, following the latest revelations in the Andrew Epstein case, was like a storm sweeping through the nation's conscience. Major newspapers carried headlines filled with outrage. Small but deeply emotional protests erupted outside Buckingham Palace and the Supreme Court. Hundreds gathered, holding signs that read "Justice for Virginia." No one saw it as merely the story of a fallen prince or a single woman seeking justice. It had become a symbol of the battle between truth and power, justice and silence, the kind of silence the royal family had maintained for far too long. On social media, the hashtag Justice for Virginia spread across the globe, echoing as a rallying cry for victims of abuse who had been forced into silence. Virginia Giuffre's family also spoke out after the release of new investigative documents. In a moving interview, her mother said, "She told the truth, but justice never came." That single sentence brought millions to tears. Virginia had dared to confront one of the most powerful systems in the world, and the price she paid was her peace, her dignity, and ultimately, her life. Many now call her the woman who awakened Britain's conscience. Meanwhile, the life of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor completely crumbled. Stripped of his royal titles, he was forced to leave Royal Lodge, once a symbol of privilege and status, and move into a modest home on the Sandringham estate. The sight of a man who was once the pride of Queen Elizabeth II, now living in quiet isolation, stirred both anger and pity across Britain. Former friends and business partners distanced themselves one by one. Several reports suggested that Andrew was considering leaving the country altogether, possibly relocating to the Middle East or Thailand, where he hoped to escape the public's judgmental gaze. But the story didn't end there. Historian Andrew Lowney revealed that more emails, messages, and documents have yet to be released. Evidence suggesting that Andrew's relationship with Epstein was far deeper and far darker than the world has been led to believe. "What we've seen is only the tip of the iceberg," he warned. "The part that remains hidden could make the entire nation shudder." His words underscored not just the gravity of the scandal, but also the unanswered question that still hangs over the monarchy. What truths are they still hiding? In April 2025, the world was stunned to learn that Virginia had died in her small Florida apartment. Her death was ruled a suicide, but few believed it was a simple, natural end. Before her passing, she completed a nearly 400-page memoir, documenting every deception, every manipulation, and every betrayal she had endured. The book quickly became a symbol of resistance for women silenced by power. Her family released a statement saying, "Virginia cracked the world of privilege. She forced the untouchable to bow before the truth." Virginia's death shocked millions, yet it also marked an irreversible turning point. The words she left behind, her testimony, her photos, her evidence, became a flame of justice no one could extinguish. For Andrew, each passing day in isolation felt like an invisible sentence. And perhaps Virginia's death itself stands as the final verdict for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, a man born into royalty, but remembered by history as a symbol of corruption and betrayal. In the end, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor lost far more than his titles. He lost the very soul of what it meant to be a prince. Once part of Britain's highest circle of power, he became the embodiment of privilege corrupted, where honor is traded for greed and truth is buried beneath lies. His story is not merely a personal downfall. It is a warning to an entire institution that has lived too long behind the mask of glory and silence. Because when public trust collapses, even the crown has nowhere left to rest. Justice may arrive late, but it never disappears. Virginia Giuffre may be gone, yet the truth she left behind still echoes, like a bell tolling in the conscience of a nation. And perhaps that, more than anything, is the final victory of the powerless over the darkness of power. A monarchy cannot endure on titles and medals alone, but on morality and on the faith of its people. To be born into privilege is fate, but how one leaves history, that is the true judgment.